welcome back to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and this is the last in the 5 Eras, 5 Days series that I've done this week for my Mystery Through History. I love historical mysteries, and so this has been a really fun series highlighting historical mystery books from very different eras in history. So I started with the Roman Empire with Murder Imperial by Paul Doherty. And if I can make it work, I'm going to put these videos up in the cards above so you can check them out if you haven't seen them yet. Then we moved into the medieval era with Mistress of the Art of Death by Ariana Franklin. On the third day, we moved up in time to the Elizabethan era with Face Down Upon an Herbal by Kathy Lynn Emerson. And then yesterday, we were in the Victorian era, although the book was set in the United States, so maybe more accurately we should call it the Gilded Age, with Still Life with Murder by P.B. Ryan, which is set in Boston in 1868. And so we are ending this series with the era between the wars with Death at Wentwater Court by Carola Dunn. This book is set in 1923 in England. That's the first in the Daisy Dalrymple series, of which there are 23. And this book was published in 1994. So what was happening in England in 1923? George V was the king and Stanley Baldwin was the prime minister. 1923 was the year of the first broadcast by the BBC. It's also the year that Howard Carter unseals the burial chamber of Tutankhamun in Egypt. It's also the era of the flapper. So the flappers were a generation of young women who wore short skirts. Scandalous. Now, of course, at the time, a short skirt meant to the knee, but it was still a short skirt. They wore their hair bobbed. They listened to jazz, and they flouted their disdain of acceptable behavior. And so our main character in this series is the Honorable Daisy Dalrymple, who would call herself a flapper. So I love this time period. The 1920s are a very interesting decade. So the war has ended, and there is economic recession going on. We haven't hit the Depression of the 30s yet, however. It's still maybe a little more celebratory. People are letting loose. The war is over. And so you have also the how do I want to word this? During the war, women were allowed more freedoms than before. They had certain jobs to do because the men were away fighting. And then when the war ended, people tried to make things go back to normal, and yet these women who experienced these freedoms didn't want things to go back to the way they were before, which is why we have the rise of the flappers, for one, but why you also had young women who never before would have considered working for a living now entering these kind of jobs. And so Daisy Dalrymple is the daughter of a viscount, and yet she wants her freedom, and so she gets a job as a journalist and a photographer with Town and Country magazine. And in this first book, she gets sent to do a story about Wentwater Court. So she's supposed to do a series about country homes, country manors, and so her first in the series is at Wentwater Court. No stranger to sprawling country estates, wealthy Daisy Dalrymple is breaking new ground at this particular manor house, having scandalously traded Silver Spoon for pen and camera to cover a story for Town and Country magazine. But her planned interviews with the inhabitants of Wentwater Court give way to interrogation when suave Lord Stephen Astwick meets a dire fate on the tranquil skating pond. Armed with evidence that his fate was anything but accidental, Daisy joins forces with Scotland Yard to examine an esteemed collection of suspects and see that the unlikely culprit doesn't slip through their fingers, just as the unfortunate Astwick slipped through the ice. So the detective throughout this series is Chief Inspector Alex Fletcher of Scotland Yard. And so there's a little bit of a romance that runs throughout this entire series. This series is fun and lighthearted, and the mysteries are generally really good. And so I'm going to read you just a little bit to give you an idea of the writing style. Outside, the air was crisp and still. Daisy couldn't resist leaving a footprint or two in the glistening, untrodden snow beside the path. It crunched underfoot. James carried the skating boots down the hill for her as she was laden with camera and tripod. When she set them up, he and Fenella sat on the bench and put on their skates. They circled slowly at the near end of the lake, waiting for her. "Go ahead," she called, already chilled fingers fumbling at the stiff catch that attached the camera to the tripod. "I'll be with you in half a mo." Waving to her, they joined hands and whizzed off towards the bridge. As they reached it, James yelled, "Stop!" They swerved to a halt beneath the arch. James moved cautiously forward into the black shadow cast by the low sun, and then Fenella screamed. As scream after scream shredded the peaceful morning, Daisy raced along the lakeside path toward the bridge. Stepping down cautiously from the bank onto the ice, she was under the stone arch before she saw what had stopped James and Fenella in their tracks. In the shadow of the bridge, the ice was shattered, and in the icy, inky water floated a man, face down. So, if you like this time period between the wars, specifically the 20s, then you might want to check out Carola Dunn's series, starting with Death at Wentwater Court. So, I hope you've enjoyed this little series of 5 eras, 5 days. Do you love the 20s like I do? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Have you read this book? What did you think about it? And I will have more videos coming up for this Mystery Through History series. Like I said, I just really love historical mysteries, and so I have quite a lot of them, and I'd like to talk about them. So I'll have some more videos coming up soon, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.